Now, rotary powered machines have never really been mainstream, whether it be 2 wheels or 4. And if you're a motorcycle enthusiast looking for something a little bit different back in the 70s and 80s, there were a few around, such as the Hercules W2000, the Norton Classic, and the Suzuki RE5. Now, we're going to take a look at those 3 motorcycles over the next 3 weeks, but first we're going to check out the Hercules W2000. Now, the Hercules W2000 was powered by a 294cc engine, so it was never really going to be a powerhouse. In fact, it produced 23 horsepower early in the model run, but that was increased to 32 by the end of the W2000. Now, this bike was actually built by Sachs. Sachs owned Hercules, and Sachs was mainly known for small capacity 2-stroke motorcycles in Europe at that time, but he's more well known these days for building top-notch suspension. Now, Hercules even built a rotary powered trail bike of all things, the KC30, and unsurprisingly it didn't sell very well and was discontinued after a very short time. And you'd have to say that the W2000 wasn't a big seller, and that's the reason why they are so rare these days. The Wankel engine from the W2000 would go on to do bigger and better things when this bike was discontinued. The BSA's engineer, David Garside, took one of these engines, put it in a BSA frame and developed it into a twin rotor design. Unfortunately, BSA went broke before it could ever make production, but that motorcycle was then to become the basis of the Norton Classic. Well, the Hercules W2000. Now, they say that the 2000 stands for the year 2000 and W for Wankel for the engine, but to be honest with you, I didn't expect a lot from this bike because to me it looked the oldest, the design was a bit archaic, but it is a dead set revelation. It's an amazing little motorcycle to ride. It might only be 294cc, but it goes almost like an Anfield RD 250/350 Yamaha. Very much a surprise packet. It's only got low miles, it's only got 5,000 miles, and as a result, everything seems to work quite nice. The suspension is much better than you would think. It soaks up the bumps, the road irregularities, and I think it's just an absolute peach of a motorcycle. I don't really understand why they didn't sell that well. If people rode them, I would have thought people would have fallen in love with them, but maybe it was just that rotary thing, you know, people weren't ready for it. Previously on Cycle Talk, we checked out the Hercules W2000 rotary powered motorcycle. Now we're going to move on to the Norton Classic. Now, the reason we've gone to this one is that the Hercules engine formed the basis of this machine via a convoluted way. But in 1987, 1988, this bike was one of 100 built, so it's a very limited edition. Prior to that, Joe Public couldn't buy a rotary powered Norton. They were the Interpol 2 for military and police use only. Now, this engine's air-cooled. It's got a twin rotor design, twin S-chute carburetors, and getting a lot of the cool air, which is important to that air-fuel mixture, is via a semi-monocoque style chassis and air ducts to get all that cool air in. And as a result, it made around about the 70 horsepower mark when the bikes were new. Some Some people sort of quoted higher figures, but that was the realistic figure. And when you look at the styling, it is very much a child of the 80s. In fact, it probably looks a little bit older than that. It's got a lot of European components on it. Brembo brakes, Grimika wheels, Coney shocks, and of course the engine and so on's European, but it also uses some Japanese components as well, like all the Yamaha switchgear. Now, when you look at the power of this sort of bike of the day, also got to think about how much further it was developed, because Norton had its NRS 588 rotary powered race bikes with riders the calibre of Steve Spray, Trevor Nation, dominating short circuit racing in the late 80s, early 90s, and also riders like Steve Hislop, Robert Dunlop on the roads. And Steve Hislop actually won the 1992 Senior TT on a rotary powered race bike. Now, when this bike was built in the late 80s, Norton was in its death throes. And we've had to wait really for another 25 years for Norton to be reborn with their new motorcycles. But back when this was built, the Rotary, it's a shame that people just weren't ready for it. It's a great motorcycle to ride. It's got some great European components. It's a beautiful engine, very smooth, good turn of power, good turn of speed. And it's a shame they only built 100 of them. Previously we looked at the Norton Classic, and now we're going to take a look at Suzuki's RE5. Probably the most recognisable rotary powered motorcycle. Now, back in the 70s, Suzuki spent a massive amount of money developing this bike, and when you look at the name RE5, the 5 apparently stands for the 5th variant of the engine rather than 500cc. Now, very technically complex, and in 1974, when this bike was released to Joe Public, they used Edgar Mitchell. He's an astronaut, American astronaut. He was the 6th man to land on the moon, and they used him widely to release this bike. And that's pretty fitting, really, because it is very jet age inspired. Now, being quite a complex motorcycle, that complexity also added weight. And with half a tank of fuel, this bike weighs over 250 kilos. But you could take that even further by buying one of the factory touring kits, which got you a fairing, a top box and panniers. As you can see, the engine is quite a part of the styling of this bike, but Suzuki outsourced the styling of the rest of the machine to an Italian design house. And the early models had some very trick things that set it apart from the competition. Things like the instrument cluster, which when you turn the ignition on, a whole panel would revolve open and show you what you needed to see. Now, Suzuki had so much invested in this bike and they wanted it to succeed so much, they offered the most comprehensive warranty at the time. In the first 12 months from brand new, if you had an engine problem with a bike, they would replace the complete engine. But you know, the biggest competition of the RE5 came from Suzuki's own catalogue. Why buy this bike when sitting beside it in the showroom was the GT750. It was cheaper, it was faster, and it handled better. Now, Suzuki's RE5 only lasted 3 years, and you'd have to say it was a financial disaster for Suzuki. And I think the lessons of pursuing outlandish designs are probably still being taught at Suzuki to this day. I said earlier that the Suzuki GT750, this bike's own stablemate, probably killed its sales, and that's a real shame, because I think if people had have taken the time to think outside the box and ride this bike, they might have been swayed to pay the extra money. This bike, the owner Kim, he spends more time riding it than polishing it, and it's a good mechanical example. And it does ride very nice. Bit of a gentleman's express, it's heavy, it's got a long wheelbase, but it does ride very nicely. The power is quite good, it's got lots of torque, and I think it's a real shame that people maybe didn't go that extra mile back in the mid-70s.